Good morning. My name is Madison Ward. I'm doing an assignment for COH 100. Today we're going to be talking about care navigators within a specific healthcare field. I chose personal nutrition. I'm going to keep my directions up here just so I know I'm not forgetting anything while I'm here. I would like to explain I did individual annotated bibliographies for each of my three articles, and I understand the directions said to do them together. However, I did make sure to include a reflection down here in which I talk about all of them at once. I just want to kind of take a brief skim over each annotated bibliography, though, just so there's a better understanding of all the articles and how they're eventually going to work together. So, for my first article, I chose one by Albertino et al. It is part of the Nutrition's Reviews, Volume 8, Number 2 journal, and it was published in May of 2024. And within this article, a bunch of researchers went out and they completed over 55 hours of field work, like including observations, and they interviewed over 165 people that included patients, staff, care navigators, and this is all between three different rehabilitation institutions. And basically, they wanted to monitor and research these patients in order to see if creating a personalized nutrition plan for each of them will help like their healing process, get to them to be a better well-being. And so what they did is they utilized artificial intelligence algorithms on tracking devices, and it could track like their nutrition levels, it could track different data levels, stuff like that. I'll get into more specific examples later on, but they also tried to explore future advancements for these diet monitoring devices, because they found that these are very beneficial to the patients. They're able to see what foods do work for them, what doesn't, what's going to improve their overall well-being and their health. Um, and so, one example that I do include in this little annotated bibliography is that people with diabetes and weight management issues benefit greatly from these because they can see, what food is going to help their insulin levels or what's going to tank it. People with diabetes typically already have a pretty good knowledge about that, but with these devices, they can pinpoint like to the exact number of how much their insulin levels are going to be going up or down. And in the end, they did actually come up with a personalized nutrition plan for each patient rather than having just a uniform diet among patients that are in institutions. For example, hospitals, those patients, they get one set meal for basically everybody, and maybe it's like a jello, a milk, maybe a little hamburger. But these people actually created different meals that include the nutrients that each patient would need that would benefit them more overall. And then, so for my next article, I chose one by Donovan et al., and this is part of the Advances in Nutrition, Volume 16, Number 3 journal, that was published in April of 2024. This one is very similar. They were also researching how personalized health tracking devices can be used within the nutritional perspective because they are already used, like I was saying, for diabetes and stuff like that. But these people are just really trying to narrow it down to the nutritional field. They also wanted to explore issues that come with it, and just how they can improve upon that. They found that the current monitoring devices often combine multiple components that need to be adjusted and regulated regularly. And if it's not, it'll cause inconsistent data, incorrect data, and that's obviously not good if it's being reported to the user or the care navigator or the patient, because then you're not going to be acting well upon that. You don't have the right data to eat what you need to eat or take the medicine that you need to have. Overall, they did discover that the current personal nutrition programs that are utilized in diet monitoring devices, they do need to focus on the safety and accuracy of the devices. Skilled experts create beneficial nutritional plans for the patients, and there needs to be a responsible and clear communication of the information being reported from the devices, and patients are subjected to strict user privacy. That is another huge issue with some of these devices that we've actually already kind of talked about in an assignment from an earlier week in this class. But this is data about your body, and it's out there. The care navigators need to be extremely careful with that and maintain a loyalty to their patients so they can build the trust by not, giving that data out or selling it or anything like that, because that is a very big, like, technological issue that people deal with today between social medias and now this and games that you play on your phone. Um, and yeah, patients just don't want that data about their body or their health being put out there. Also, there's a lot of artificial intelligence advancements that are coming with this, and these researchers concluded that while this is like a huge advancement and they think that these monitoring devices should continue to develop around the artificial intelligence, they need to maintain a level of privacy for their patients and maintain the regulatory framework that was already in place. Kind of just like the same thing I was already talking about, where you need to be mindful of their data and have your patient be able to trust you with that. But also, they were saying like they don't think the entire model of the monitoring devices should be changed. You just need to, instead of relying on artificial intelligence, you need to use it as a tool. And then, so for my last article, I chose Olafson et al., and it's Navigating Person-Centered Nutrition and Mealtime Care and Rehabilitation. They created a conceptual model in this one. This one is from the Journal of Human Nutrition and Diabetics, Volume 38, Number 3, and this was published pretty recently in June of 2025. And so they focused more specifically on how the rehabilitative patients can receive substantially improved care if they receive these personalized nutrition plans, which we have already explored within the first two. I would say that the first two articles, though, focused more on the tracking devices themselves, especially in the context of other diseases or health issues that one might have. This one is a lot more pertinent to just nutrition. But they claim that researchers surrounding creating personalized nutrition plans for individuals is pretty lacking as of right now, and it hasn't been extremely integrated well with rehabilitation institutions. In fact, most places still do not. It's kind of like a very 1 in 100 type of thing that you would see in an institution. And these researchers created a conceptual model using an algorithm, and using this algorithm, they came up with this 5-step plan that would ensure improved care for patients, and it follows the guidelines that they were following with the personal nutrition plans. But anyways, the first step would be the nutrition assessment. Then they have the priorities of the patient that you would, deem what is a priority after you complete the nutrition assessment. And then there's intervention. So if that patient would have like an issue with having to eat certain things, like they say they have weight management issues and they really, really don't want to start eating healthy, that's when you step in and you intervene. And then there's monitoring, that's pretty self-explanatory, and then evaluating, same thing, pretty self-explanatory. But they carried out all of these steps, and they found that it overall like extremely benefited the patients and the care navigators all around. However, this is a plan that the care navigators need to be the one carrying it out, because if not, then it's just not going to work out correctly. You can't trust a patient to completely do that on their own accurately. But overall, like I was saying, all of these articles, they express similar concerns regarding care navigators and the nutritional benefits that can be further imposed upon patients if it is executed correctly. I kind of summarize a lot here about those articles again, but especially in Albertine et al., and then the last one, Olafson, they all further suggest that the care navigators should be the ones implementing these regimes of the person-centered, individualized diets within more rehabilitative institutions, because that uniform diet amongst all patients is not as beneficial as it can be, which was basically the overall conclusion, or maybe a sub-conclusion of all of these articles. So at this point, it is clear that, patients eating a specific meal that is tailored to them and their issues that they're dealing with is going to be a lot better than just having the same hospital meal for every patient. I will go into some more examples, though. Like I said before, diabetics utilize nutrition tracking devices in order to see more accurately what foods are affecting their insulin levels. Patients that are suffering from a physical injury may need to eat foods that are higher in protein in order to promote the regrowth of muscle fibers. Patients that have medical issues with their colon may need to follow a diet that is higher in fiber. Also, patients that are like dehydrated, they shouldn't eat like a super dry diet. They're going to need a lot more liquids. Maybe there's going to be more drinks in their meal. Maybe it's going to be foods with a lot of water in them, like lettuce, greens, stuff like that. There's a bunch of more examples that you could go into, and I kind of worded them as if they were hypotheticals, but I do want to point out, like, this is already in effect. These are things that happen. But overall, all three of these articles work together to prove that the individual person-centered diets should be the standard for patient care given by care navigators, and because it explores the myriad benefits that come from it. Several of the authors also warn that care navigators need to be mindful of keeping their patients informed and secure their privacy. I already talked about this a lot about the privacy data, but keeping them informed is also another huge point. If the patient doesn't know what of their data is actually being reported or collected or being seen, that's just not good. I mean, you're keeping them in the dark, and that is like a huge code of ethics for care navigators. And you just need to keep that trust between them and their patient. Overall, though, all three of the articles express their concern about implementing these personalized diets within the rehabilitative institutions because it has proven over and over how beneficial it is towards the patient health. And also, just the use of these tracking devices further advance this personalized nutrition regime that is trying to be implemented. But yeah, basically all three of these articles they do deal with similar issues, but they had enough differences where they really worked together to show how each other helped each other to back their conclusions. And identifying just how I believe each resource is helpful, obviously are helpful. I just went through how all of them benefited the patients and the care navigators themselves too. Overall, I do think that personally this is something that does need to be implemented before or more within institutions because I have never ever heard about this before about having the person-centered diets. I have heard about the tracking devices, and I think it's great that they're already advancing those so much. But yeah, just one thing about the diets as I conclude here is you always hear people talking about hospital food and how bad it is, and that's like a subjective opinion-based thing. But I think that there's a lot of improvements that can still be made. If like I kind of use my real world person examples, if I have a physical like injury to myself, I'm gonna want to get foods that are going to make me feel better. Same thing with diabetics and their insulin levels. I'm sure it's kind of hard having to play that guessing game of what you're going to eat. And if you don't know if it's going to spike your insulin level or if it's just going to kind of remain the same or tank it, and these are all life threatening things. So, overall, implementing these things, these tracking devices, and then also these personalized centered diets they're going to do wonders, I think, for the care navigators and that the level of care, of quality care that they're going to be able to provide for their patients. And I think the numbers will continue to go up from there. But thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed.